Buying seeds should be an exciting time for us gardeners. But for some of us, especially beginners, it can very easily feel overwhelming. There are racks of seed packets, catalogs, and online shops. Every packet has different labels, varieties, and claims, and it can be hard to tell what actually matters. That's why I put together this free PDF guide, 5 pages, full of information about how to read seed packets and how to boil it down to what you really need. You can download yours in the link in the description box below. In this video, I want to walk you through how to think about seed buying in a way that feels intentional and calm so you avoid overbuying and you buy exactly what your garden needs. Let's get into it. The very first thing you should think about when seed buying isn't the crop, it's the timing. In Florida, we don't just have one big planting season. We can plant nearly year-round, although it's really a big push in fall and a big push in spring. And it looks slightly different whether you're in North Florida, Central Florida, or South Florida. It seems so much less overwhelming when you're only looking at like a 3-month period of time for buying seeds. Nobody said you can't buy seeds in January and then buy again in May and then buy again in August. So before you buy any seeds, ask yourself what you're planting this month, next month, and the month after that. Climate matters a lot when choosing seeds. In a warm and humid environment like Florida, disease pressure is just higher, and it always will be. And it doesn't always mean you're doing something wrong. It's just the environment we live in. This is why disease resistance is something that I do pay attention to when I'm choosing my seeds. Now, it doesn't mean the plant won't ever get sick, but it does mean it's going to be productive longer. Climate fit and disease resistance are just part of smart seed buying. Before you buy any seeds, you need to decide how you're going to grow the crop. Some crops love to be direct sowed. Think beans, peas, corn, carrots, radishes, and other root veggies. They love to just have the seed directly planted outside in your garden. So for those, it's a no-brainer, buy seeds for them. All of your cucurbits like cucumbers and watermelons and squashes, they also like to be direct sowed. Some crops can go either way, like a lettuce. You can transplant or direct sow them. Now there's some crops that love to be seed started and transplanted into the garden. Those are going to be like eggplants, peppers, and tomatoes. So you need to know in advance, am I going to start from seed and grow under a grow light indoors with those crops, or am I going to just plan to go to the store and buy a couple transplants for them? If you're going to buy transplants at the store, don't even bother buying seeds. If you're going to do seed starting, of course you buy the seeds. Just thinking through this part could potentially save a lot of unnecessary seed buying. You'll also see different types of seeds listed on the seed packet. You'll see heirloom varieties, hybrid varieties, and open-pollinated varieties. A hybrid, like my favorite Megatron jalapeno, is bred for its great flavor, its large size, and its uniform production. But hybrids are only good for one seed purchase. You can't save the seeds from that jalapeno and expect it to grow true to type the next time you grow it. So this is something that you're going to buy over and over. An heirloom seed like this Black Beauty eggplant has a long history of stable genetics. Usually heirloom means it's at least a 50-year-old genetic line, and these are usually favorites for their flavor profile or sometimes their texture. These are not necessarily easier to grow. A lot of times they don't have the desirable disease resistance that a hybrid might have. But the advantage here is flavor, and you can save the seeds and only ever buy these seeds one time. And then there's a third type. It's called open-pollinated. Open-pollinated are similar to heirloom in the sense that it's a stable genetic line and you can save the seeds, but it just doesn't have that 50-year longevity that an heirloom does. Open-pollinated is naturally pollinated by wind or insects, and they kind of overlap. Heirloom seeds are open-pollinated, but open-pollinated is not necessarily heirloom, because heirloom really just means the duration of that genetic line. Now, I'm not saying that one type is better than the other, but it is useful information to consider when choosing your seeds. Now, there's also many different varieties of the same crop. So for example, in a tomato, you might have San Marzano, Everglades, Sun Gold, Cherokee Purple. There's tons of varieties of tomatoes. Similar to cucumbers, there's Boston Pickling, there's Monica, there's Market More, all types of different ones. So you can go down a rabbit hole and end up with what I would say is too many varieties in your garden. Let me share a personal example of when I think I had too many varieties. This year I planted 2 different types of collard greens. I planted a Top Bunch 2.0 collard green from Botanical Interests, and I planted Georgia Southern collard greens from Jera's Garden. And I swear I labeled them, but something happened to the label and they're gone. But anyway, they have a slightly different growing habit. The Top Bunch grows like smaller leaves and it has lots of little side shoots. They're more tender, so they might have a little bit lower cooking time, but they're essentially harvested and prepared the same way when you cook them. A Georgia Southern collard green has that one growth point from the center and really big leaves. And my problem this year was trying to identify in the early stages of the plant what plant it was and differentiating it from my broccoli in the garden. So I've grown Georgia Southern collards several times in the past, so I was pretty confident which one was a Georgia Southern collard. But the Top Bunch really had me wondering what that plant was because the label was gone and I had forgotten. So in this sense, it seems like I just had too many varieties in the garden. It didn't give me a leg up on anything. I should have just stuck with the Georgia Southern collards across the board. But in some cases, it makes sense to have 2 varieties. Something like a cucumber, you'll have a pickling variety that has a tougher, more crisp skin, and then you'll have a slicing variety of cucumber that has a thinner skin and is much more pleasant to just eat raw. So in that case, you might have a Boston Pickling and you might have a Market More in your garden. And when it comes to tomatoes, you might have a slicing tomato and you might have a cherry tomato. So make sure you have a real purpose behind the different varieties in your garden. So now that we understand why fewer varieties in the garden is probably the better way to go, this is where we can choose to be really selective about the variety we put in the garden. And this is where disease resistance comes into play. An example of a disease-resistant variety I have in the garden is a Carolina Wonder Bell Pepper. I chose this one because it's a root knot nematode resistant variety, meaning it will somewhat deter root knot nematodes from burrowing into the roots and creating galls and reproducing. When it comes to cucurbits, here in Florida, they can be very hard to grow because of powdery mildew and downy mildew. So I highly recommend seeking a variety that's resistant to those diseases. Another thing that can throw people off when buying seeds is how different the seed packets look from different companies. I'm going to show you a few examples. So right here, this is Botanical Interests. I think I actually really like the way that they do their seed packet. They put a lot of information on the packet. You can see the count or the weight, you can see the variety and the scientific name. And then on the back side, you've got days to emerge, seed depth, seed spacing, row spacing, maturity, and you see a recommendation about whether to direct sow or transplant the crop. On something like survival garden seeds, you can see some information, non-GMO and heirloom. And then on the back, you see a lot of the germination time. This is like days to emerge, soil temperature, the light requirement, the planting depth. And it says whether to direct sow or transplant the crop. And then it even tells you how to save the seeds. So that's a nice touch by Survival Garden Seeds. And then Vigo Garden, you can see variety, again, the weight, whether it's heirloom or hybrid on the front. And then you've got all this seed depth, light, days to harvest, plant spacing, your expiration date, and even your germination rate. Some places don't publish the germination rate, but Vigo does, and I actually like to see that. And then you have Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. I actually really like their decorations. I think it's cute. And then they have very similar design on the back to Botanical Interests with all the same information. And then you've got somebody like Jera's Garden. Love to support somebody local here in Florida. When you buy her seeds, she says that she puts very little information on the seed packet, and instead she publishes a video for every type of seed that she sells. So you can watch her videos about how to grow them on YouTube. Fairly often I get questions about where I like to buy my seeds. And the answer is I source my seeds from a variety of places, not just one. Let me list out a few of the different places that I buy seeds. And if you guys have any places that you buy seeds from that you'd recommend, drop them in a comment below. So I do buy a lot from Survival Garden Seeds on Amazon. I've had great luck with them. No complaints. And then I do Jarrah's Garden. And then I do Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. I think they have the cutest cartoons or sketches on the seed packet. And then I get some from Baker Creek Seeds. By far my biggest source is Botanical Interests. I think they have a great variety selection. I love the organization on the website, and I love the information on the seed packet. And pretty often they have all vegetables, herbs, and flowers that I want. And then I've recently been getting some Vigo Garden seeds. I love these as well. They have lots of great information on the back as well. And I like their sketches on the front too. I'm a sucker for a good sketch. And then when I save them myself, I need to work on my sketches. But I just use a seed packet envelope that I got off Amazon. I'll put a link in the description box below if you want to check it out. But this is what I use for saving my own seeds. And this was a Boston pickling cucumber that I saved recently this year. And I plan to plant it again. Seed buying can feel pretty complicated at the beginning, but just try to do it in smaller increments and think through what you're buying, and you should be able to make some good choices about seed buying. Remember to get your free download to simplify all of this information that I just shared. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.